Aloha Algebra 2. I'm throwing you guys some love today. Here's a little tutorial for some of the tougher sections here in Algebra 2. Khalil Mack with the Halloween. All right. Section 5.6 is the fundamental theorem of algebra, okay? Pretty much the most important theorem of all of algebra. Now, when we use the fundamental theorem of algebra, we do it to find zeros, okay? So let's go ahead and I'm going to do one problem with you here so that you guys have access to all of this stuff whenever you need it, okay? We got to get back to this bad boy, though. Come on. Where's my screen? Okay, we want that. All right, here we go. So let's move this bad boy up. We're going to do number 24. What does 24? It says y equals x to the fourth plus 3x cubed plus x squared minus 12x minus 20. And what we're asking you to do is to find all the roots, find all the zeros. They could be real, they could be rational, they could be irrational, right? Or they could even be irrational, or they even could be a little bit of imaginary or what we call complex. All right, now we all know that if that guy's a 4 right there, I better get 4 answers, right? Some of them could be real, some of them could be complex, but I better get 4 of them. Well, how can I get those 4? Well, usually the first thing you should do is find out what are the possible real ones, okay? And the way you find your possible real ones, let's go ahead and do that over here. What are my possible real roots, okay? And the way I find my possible real roots is we do P's over Q's. Remember, P is the last dude, Q is the first dude. So we have plus or minus 20 over plus or minus 1, right? 20 is the last guy. There he is. 1 is the first coefficient, which is that guy right there. And then remember, we write down all the factors. So how the heck? Oh, my gosh. 1 times 20, right? That's a factor of 20. What's another one? 2 times 10. Okay. Oh, my gosh. What's another one? Oh, 4 times 5. So there is just a ton right there. On the bottom, luckily, we're just plus or minus 1. Because remember, when we find all the possibilities, I've got to take that 1, and I've got to divide it by everything in the bottom. So 1 divided by 1 is 1. If there was another guy in the bottom, like let's say there was my Q was a 2, then it'd be 1 over 1 and 1 over 2. Thankfully, there's just one guy in the bottom there. So that guy is done. Then I go to 2. And 2 divided by 1 is 2. That guy's done, right? This actually ends up being pretty nice because there's only one thing on the bottom. Like I just said, if there were 2 things on the bottom, I would have to just keep on doing it. Okay, so now comes the brunt of the work, right, class? I've got to figure out which one of those possibilities are factors. And remember, it is a factor if and only if it gives me a remainder of 0. So there's a couple ways I could do that, right? We could do a little sweet little synthetic division, right? And synthetic division is fun to do, but that would be taking up a lot of paper. I don't want to take up a lot of paper. So the quicker way to do it is I take any one of these guys and I plug it in. Okay, let's say I take a 1. Let's start out with 1, and I plug it into all the x's. And guess what? If I get an answer of 0, that means I get a remainder of 0, which means it's a factor. Okay, and I showed you this in class. You can use your calculator to do this, okay? Because if not, it's just a lot of busy work. Okay, and I don't want you guys doing busy work. So let's go over how you would do this in your calculator again. And the way you do it in your calculator is you plug the function. Okay, and you plug the function in right there, right, class? You kind of see it up there, right? You see my cursor? I can't circle. So there we go. You plug it in right there, okay? And then what you do after that is you hit second, quit. You get out of there, okay? And let's see if I plugged in a 1, if I actually would get a 0, which would mean a remainder of 0, which means it works. And then I do synthetic division, okay? So we hit alpha trace if we have the new school calculators, and I hit enter. What do I do if I have the old school calculators? You hit vars, you go over to y vars, you hit enter, and then you choose y1. So a couple of ways you can get it, right? I like the new version, so I'm just going to go alpha trace and hit enter, and then where I want, and then I'm going to plug a 1 in. That means I'm plugging a 1 in for all the x's, and booyah! Negative 27. That means if I plug in a 1, I get a negative 27. That means 1 is not a factor. Okay, let's go alpha trace. Let's try negative 1, right? Because it was plus or minus 1. So we plug in a negative 1. Booyah! Oh, snap! See what I mean? If I had to do synthetic division for all these, I would be getting mad right now. All right, let's try dos, ni, or 2. Okay, so there we go. We go that bad boy. Let's put a 2 in there. Booyah. Bang, bang, choo-choo train. 2 works. That means 2 gives me a remainder of 0. If 2 gives me a remainder of 0, right, class? What the heck does that mean? If 2 gives me a remainder of 0, that means it's a factor. That means I can simplify it by doing synthetic division. So, okay, let's start here with blue. So that means, because this is synthetic division, it's side work. So here's the brunt of my work is going to be done in there, okay? My side work means I'm going to say, hey, 2 works, so let's use 2. And then remember, when we do synthetic, we put the coefficients. 1, right? 3, right? 1, correct? -12 and -20. Ooh, kind of. And then booyah. Now remember, I have x to the 4th, x to the 3rd, x squared, and x to the 1st. If I was to skip any of those, let's say I put my hand, or that 3x cubed isn't there, let's say that wasn't there, you'd have to put a 0 in for that bad boy when you do synthetic division. All right, synthetic division, here we go. Booyah, drop that 1. 1 times 2. Combine. 3 plus 2 is 5. Multiply. 5 times 2 is 10. A 1 and a 10 gives me an 11. An 11 and a 2 gives me a 22. A -12 and a 22, if I combine them, gives me a 10. A 10 and a 2 gives me a 20. Oh, snap, check that out. 0 remainder. Okay, that's the remainder. That's no x. That's x. That's x squared, and that's x to the 3rd. So now I have to rewrite this guy. Okay, that's what we do over here. This is the answer, right? I'm going to put it back here in red. So we got y equals. Okay, I have... what was that guy? 2 was a factor, so I have to write it as a factor. Remember? So that's x minus 2. Because if I plug a 2 in there, I get a 0, which means it was a factor. And then what's left? What's left is what I got when I did synthetic, which is x cubed plus 5x squared plus 11x plus 10. Right, class? Now that I could take down a little bit further. Remember, you have to keep on doing this until you get 3 terms, something that we could factor or maybe even use the quadratic formula with. Okay, so how do I keep on going? Well, guess what? We get to use the calculator. So we go back to the calculator, and I've got to find something else that works. Because if it doesn't go down to 3 or it's an x to the 3rd, it means there's something else that works. So let's go ahead and alpha trace. Where did we leave off? It was plus or minus 1. They didn't both work. 2 worked. Do you think -2 would work? Well, let's try it. Because if not, I got to try everything. I need to get a 0. Man, I hope this works. Sweet, I got a 0. -2 works too. So guess what? I'm done trying terms. So now I just go back to my little work here. Uh-oh, -2 works. So what am I doing this in? I'm doing this in blue. So let's get this back to blue. So all side work over here done in blue. So now I do a -2 there. Okay, but then I use what was left over, right, class? So I have a 1, a 5. I use what's right there, right? A 1, a 5, an 11, and a 10. And then I, guess what? Just do a little synthetic again, right? And so I drop that guy. That's a 1. I multiply. That's a -2. I combine, which is a 3. I multiply, which is a -6. I combine, which is a 5. I multiply -10. Sweet, right? I guaranteed that because in the work I did in my calculator, it said I had to get 0. Right? That's what your calculator does. It gives you a remainder. Now remember, that's your remainder, which is 0. That's no x, that's 1x, and that's 2 x's. So how the heck do I write my answer now? Well, my answer now is y equals, right? That x minus 2, that dude's hanging around, right? You just drop that guy down. Okay, oh, that dude worked, right? Since that dude worked, I'd have to write that as a 0, which would be x plus 2. And then I'm going to simplify this. Well, how do I simplify that? Well, I did by writing that, since that was a factor, and then what was left over when I divided was this. Right? When we divide, we're just simplifying. Booyah! Oh, sweet. I've got 3 of them. Tree! And if I have 3 of them, I either factor, right, class? Or if factoring doesn't work, I got a quadratic formula, that bad boy. So let's get blue. Okay, it's an x squared. There's 3 of them. So let's do a little side work. I'm going to come up here so everybody can see it. Booyah, that's a, 5 goes on top, right? Because it's a 1 times a 5. That goes up there. And then that's a 3. Okay, let's see if something works. Oh, man. What is 5? 5 and a 1. But that's not 3. That doesn't work. What you doing? The only other thing would be a -5 and a -1. That gives me -6. Oh, nothing works. Sweet! I get to do the quadratic formula. All right. Do I got some room? Because this is going to be a little bit of some side work, right? Or actually, when the quadratic formula works, it means I can't really simplify this anymore. It means I'm solving it. It means I'm getting answers. Let's do all of our answers in black, huh? Our final answers. Well, we all know that I have 3 lanes right now, right? My first answer would be x minus 2 equals 0, which we already knew was x equals 2, right? How did I know that? From that guy right there. My other answer would be x plus 2 equals 0. Well, if I subtract 2 on both sides, I get -2. So there's my 2 answers. Oh, sweet. I'm supposed to get 4 answers. Those are what we call 2 real answers, right? They're real, right? 2, -2. Those are real. Okay. All right, this guy here. It's not factorable. So that means these guys are going to be irrational answers. They might even be complex answers. So let's try this out. Okay, I have to set that equal to 0. Okay, just like I did every other one, right? It's not factorable, so then I just get after it and I find the other zeros. Okay, well, the only way I can do that since it's not factorable, right, class, is I got to do a little quadratic formula, right? And if you're in my class, the way we do the quadratic formula is we do a little side work first, right? And we find the discriminant, and the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. B squared, let's see what b squared is. That is tree. I'm going to square that. Minus 4 times a is 1, and c is 5, right? Getting that all from that piece right there, A, B, and C. All right, so we have 3 squared, which is 9. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, right? I've got to do my exponents first. And then I do multiplication from left to right. So 9 minus 4. Okay, and then I'm going to multiply that. Ooh, snappity-dappity. I get -11, right? I got -11. All right, that's my discriminant. So if we learned back in the day, that kind of means there's going to be complex or imaginary answers. So here we go. Right now, I can really just write the final answer, which is x equals 2. And how do I write the final answer? I use a quadratic formula, which is -b, opposite of b, opposite of b. B is a +3, so negative or opposite would be -3, plus or minus the square root of my discriminant, which was -11, right? We found it right there, all over 2 times a, and a is 1. Woo! So we learned in class, right? So my answer is -3 plus or minus. I cannot have that negative in there. No way, Jose. So we bring it out as an I. Do you know what the square root of 11 is? Does 11 tree down? 11 does not tree down, so that's simplified. So, wow, one answer is 2, right? 2 was the first answer. -2 was the second answer. The third answer is -3 plus I square root 11 over 2. And the last answer is -3 minus I square root of 11 over 2. There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Problem over. Aloha. Do your homework. Do your Math Excel.